She was 19 years old, scrubbing another family's floor, while her own future rotted in a storeroom that smelled of old stockfish. Her uncle had promised her parents everything.
For Adaeze?
School,
Yes.
a future,
Education will
a
give her a better
chance.
future. A
They
chance
had
we never
believed
had.
him
This
because he
school
came
is a
home
path
in a
to a better
car
life.
and wore a pressed senator shirt and had a way of making his lies sound like plans. They sent their daughter to him with a small bag and a big dream. What he gave her instead was a broom, a mop, a 4:30 alarm, and a storeroom mat, and 4 years of watching his own children leave for school every morning while she stood at the gate with a bucket in her hand. He thought he had taken everything from her. He had no idea who she was quietly becoming. Before we begin, dear friends, if you are new to Helen Folktale, welcome. This is your home for the most powerful African stories ever told. Please take just one moment right now to like this
Why
video,
won't you let me
drop
eat
a
with
comment
you?
below,
Not
and
now,
subscribe
dear.
so
We're
you
eating.
never miss a
But
single
I'm so
story.
hungry.
It means the world to me. Now, let us begin. Back in the village of Oguta, her parents believed she was in school. They believed this because Uncle Boniface had told them so. He sent messages. He described the school she attended, the subjects she was studying, the progress she was making. He had even, on one occasion, produced a piece of paper he called a report card and sent it home by a traveling neighbor. It was not a report card, but her parents did not know that. They were proud. They told people in the village that their daughter was in Lagos, getting an education, building a future.
Yes, I am so
And in a storeroom on the second floor of a house in Surulere, their daughter was working through mathematics problems by torchlight in the margins of a discarded textbook because she had decided that if nobody was going to give her an education, she was going to build one herself. Her name was Adaeze. In their language, it meant daughter of a king. Nobody in that household used her name. They called her girl. They called her come here. They called her, are you deaf? Didn't you hear me calling you? Adaeze answered to all of it and held the real name quietly inside herself where they couldn't reach it. She had been 15 when Uncle Boniface came home to Oguta for Christmas. He came in a car. This alone was enough to make the visit an event. He wore a pressed senator shirt and good leather shoes, and he greeted people with the particular energy of a man who needed the village to understand that Lagos had been good to him. He brought bags of rice and tins of malt drink, and he sat in the front room of Adaeze's family home and spoke to her parents with the authority of a man delivering a solution to a problem they had not yet named. Adaeze's family was not poor in the way that people who have never known poverty imagine poverty. They were poor in the specific grinding way of a family that works very hard and still cannot get ahead. Her father repaired motorcycles, her mother sold groundnuts and smoked catfish at the roadside market, and together they were feeding 6 children and paying rent and keeping the roof patched, and there was never quite enough of anything. Adaeze was the second born and the only daughter. She had been at the top of her class since primary school. Her teacher had written in her final primary school report, in red ink, which was unusual, that this child should not be allowed to stop her education under any circumstances. Her parents had read those words and felt the weight of not being able to guarantee them. And then Uncle Boniface sat in their front room with his pressed senator shirt and his good shoes and his car parked outside, and he made a proposal. He would take Adaeze to Lagos, enroll her in a good school. She would live with his family, help a little around the house the way any child helps, and in exchange, she would receive the education her parents could not afford to give her. She would come home for Christmas. She would call every week. Her parents asked questions. He had an answer for everyone. They prayed over it. They discussed it. They looked at Adaeze, who was sitting in the corner of the room trying to look like she was not listening to a conversation that was entirely about her future. She was not afraid. She was 15 and full of the particular courage of someone who has not yet learned all the ways that trust can be misplaced. Her mother braided her hair the night before she left. Her father pressed 200 naira in her hand at the gate, everything he had, and told her, make us proud. She told him she would. She meant it with everything she had. Nobody knew what was already waiting for her in that Lagos house, what had already been decided before the car turned off their road. The house in Surulere was large by the standards of anything Adaeze had known. 2 floors, a generator, a gate with a padlock, a tiled sitting room with a large television, and chairs she was later told not to sit in. Aunty Ngozi met her at the door. Aunty Ngozi was Uncle Boniface's wife, a compact, precise woman with a face that had learned very efficiently to express approval and disapproval and very little in between. She looked at Adaeze like someone looks at a piece of furniture they are deciding where to put. She asked if Adaeze was strong. Adaeze said yes. Aunty Ngozi nodded, as if this confirmed something. The first week, Adaeze waited for someone to mention school. She helped willingly with small things. She did not want to be a burden. She wanted to see she was responsible and grateful. On the 8th day, the family's cleaning staff announced she was returning to her home state. She left on a Friday morning with her 2 bags and her tin trunk. By Friday afternoon, Aunty Ngozi had shown Adaeze where the cleaning supplies were kept. By Saturday, she had explained the daily schedule. By Monday, Adaeze was doing everything the housekeeper had done: cooking, sweeping, mopping, laundry, childcare for the 3 younger children, all of it. She was still waiting to be enrolled in school. She waited 2 months before she asked. Aunty Ngozi told her, with the patience of someone explaining something obvious to someone slow, that she needed to be patient, that everything had its time. Adaeze was patient. She believed patience was a virtue and that things worked out for those who waited. She did not yet know that patience in the wrong hands is simply the longest route to nowhere. Months became a year became 2. The uncle's 3 children put on their uniforms every morning and climbed into the car that took them to their private school. And every morning, Adaeze stood at the gate and watched the school car disappear around the corner, then turned back to the compound and picked up her broom. Back in Oguta, her parents received messages from Uncle Boniface telling her that Adaeze was doing well, studying hard, growing into a fine young woman. They were proud. They thanked God. Nobody told them the truth. And nobody in that house imagined that what they were doing to this girl, what they were taking from her year by year, quietly, without drama, would one day come back to find them in a way none of them could have predicted. In 4 years, Adaeze filled 11 notebooks. Words, meanings, sentences, facts she overheard from the radio, the names of countries she heard on the news, mathematics walked through by hand from a Form 3 textbook she found discarded behind the house. She walked through every problem in it, then started again to make sure she understood each one differently the second time. She was not waiting anymore. She had stopped waiting somewhere in the 2nd year when she understood that waiting for Uncle Boniface and Aunty Ngozi to give her what they had promised was like waiting for the harmattan to bring rain. The conditions for it did not exist. So she built her own conditions. She found where the public library was, 3 bus stops away, and on days that she could leave without being noticed, she went. She did not always have bus money. On those days, she walked, 40 minutes each way. She sat in the library for whatever time she could steal, and she read history, science, literature, law, whatever was on the shelf that she had not read yet. The librarian, an older woman named Mrs. Adetutu, noticed her after the 4th visit. She noticed the notebook. She noticed the way Adaeze read, not the way people read when they are killing time, but the way people read when they are building something. Mrs. Adetutu told her one afternoon, quietly, that the local government evening school 3 streets away was enrolling students. Classes ran from 6 to 8 in the evening. The fee was small. Adaeze stared at her for a long moment. Then she asked how to apply. She paid with money she had saved over 8 months. Small coins kept from market change, rounding numbers in her head when sent to buy provisions, and keeping the difference. 5 naira here, 10 naira there, building it slowly with the patience of someone who has finally directed patients toward their own rescue. She did not tell Uncle Boniface. She did not tell Aunty Ngozi. She simply began attending evening classes, and for the first time in 4 years, she sat in a room where someone expected something of her mind. She was the oldest new student in her class by 3 years and the fastest learner by a distance that made the teacher pay attention. The teacher, Miss Emeka, who ran the class with the energy of someone who genuinely believed these 2 evening hours mattered, noticed within the second week that Adaeze was not a beginner. She was not filling gaps, she was accelerating. She answered questions the other students hadn't reached yet. She asked questions that pushed the lesson forward. Miss Onyeka started staying 5 minutes after class to talk to her. And it was in this class, on a Tuesday evening in November, that Adaeze met Emeka. He was not a student. He was a volunteer, a quiet civil servant who came twice a week to help with mathematics because the class had no dedicated maths teacher, and he had offered his time without being asked. He was 31. He was unremarkable to look at in the way that genuinely good people are sometimes unremarkable. No performance, no announcement, just a person who showed up and did what he said he would do. He noticed Adaeze the way you notice something that doesn't quite fit the category it's been placed in. She was completing the mathematics exercises before he finished explaining them. He asked her about this, not as a compliment, more as a question, the way you ask about something you are trying to understand. She told him she had taught herself from a discarded textbook. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "There are other textbooks if you want them." That was how it started. Not dramatically, not romantically, not yet. Just a man who had textbooks and a woman who needed them, and one small, quiet act of human decency that would, in the fullness of time, become one of the most consequential things either of them ever did. For 6 months, Adaeze studied. She moved through subjects the way she had always moved through things she loved, completely, hungrily, without waste. She was 19 years old, and she was the best student in the room, and she had not had a real day off in 4 years, and she was the happiest she had been since she left Oguta. And then, inevitably, the household found out. It was Chisom who saw her. Chisom was the oldest of Uncle Boniface's children, 15 now, sharp-eyed in the way that children who grow up in households with secrets often become. She had been in the car with her father, returning from somewhere, when they passed the evening school building, and she had seen Adaeze through the open window, standing in the doorway with a notebook under her arm, talking to a man Chisom did not recognize. She told her mother that evening. What happened next was not a confrontation. It was something quieter and more effective. Auntie Ngozi began extending Adaeze's duties. The morning start time moved from 5 o'clock to 4:30. New tasks appeared that happened to conclude just past 6 each evening. Market errands were rescheduled to Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, the exact days Emeka came to teach. She said nothing directly. She simply made the space for the evening school disappear. When Adaeze asked, carefully, respectfully once, if she could attend her classes, Auntie Ngozi looked at her with the expression of someone who has decided the most powerful answer is no answer at all. She walked away. Adaeze stood in the corridor after she left and understood, with a clarity that was almost peaceful, that she was looking at the end of something. Not the end of her ambition, not the end of her effort, the end of her willingness to wait for permission. She went to her storeroom. She sat on her thin mat. She took out her notebook, the 12th one now, and she wrote one sentence at the top of a clean page. The sentence was, "I am leaving." She told Emeka on a Saturday. She met him at the library, an errand to the market stretched by 40 minutes, and told him everything. Not because she needed rescuing. She had already decided to leave regardless of what he said. She told him because he was the only person in Lagos who knew her actual name, not the version of her that the household had decided she was, and she wanted one person to know. Emeka listened. He did not interrupt. He did not offer immediate solutions or immediate opinions. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I know someone in Ikeja who rents rooms to working women. The rate is reasonable. I can speak to her." He also said, "The examination board has a registration deadline in 3 weeks. If you want to write the WAEC exams, we need to register before then. I can cover the fee. Repay it in whatever way works for you or not at all. I leave that entirely to you. Adaeze looked at him. He looked back with the complete, uncomplicated steadiness of a man who is not calculating anything. She said, I will repay every naira with interest. He said, I know. She left on a Thursday morning. She did not write a letter. She rose at her usual 4:30, completed every task as she always did, and then at 7 o'clock, when the household was at breakfast and the children were preparing for school and nobody was watching the storeroom, she picked up her bag, the same small bag she had arrived with 4 years ago, slightly heavier now with 12 notebooks, and walked out the compound gate. She did not run. She walked, steadily, in her own pace, in a direction she had chosen. Behind her, when they finally noticed she was gone, the household erupted. Auntie Ngozi called a phone number that did not exist for her. Uncle Boniface contacted Adaeze's parents in Oguta and presented himself as a wounded beneficiary betrayed by ingratitude. Her parents were confused. They called the only number they had, the one Uncle Boniface had given them, and received no answer. A message arrived eventually through a chain of neighborhood connections. Come back and apologize, or we will make sure your family knows what kind of girl you have become. Adaeze received this message. She read it once. Then she set it aside and opened her study materials. She had 12 days until the examination registration deadline. She did not have time for threats from people who had used 4 years of her life and were now angry that she had taken the rest of it back. The room in Ikeja was small and honest. A single bed, a window into a narrow yard, a shared kitchen on the landing. The landlady, Mrs. Taiwo, looked at Adaeze for 30 seconds on arrival and she said, you pay on the 1st of the month, you keep your space clean, and you do not bring trouble into this house. Adaeze agreed to all three. She found work in the second week, a data entry position in a small logistics company. The salary was modest. It was hers. She studied in the evenings and on weekends. Emeka continued to bring materials and review her work. What was growing between them grew the way real things grow, slowly, without announcement, in the direction of something sustainable. She wrote her WAEC exams 4 months after leaving the house. She passed with distinctions in 6 of her 8 subjects. When the results came, she sat in her small, honest room and looked at the paper for a long time, not crying, not celebrating, just looking at what 4 years of 5 o'clock mornings and stolen library hours and torchlight notebooks had been moving towards, and letting it be real. Then she called her mother. She told her everything. Her call lasted 2 hours. Her mother cried for most of it, not from shame, but from the grief of a parent who understands too late that they trusted the wrong person with the most precious thing they had. Her father did not speak for the first 20 minutes after her mother passed him the phone. Then he said, "You are your grandfather's child." In their family, that was the highest thing that could ever be said about a person. As for Uncle Boniface, he found out what Adaeze had become not through a family conversation, but through a television screen. 3 years after she left his house, on a news program covering young professionals making an impact in Lagos, a segment ran about a 22-year-old woman who had started a community education initiative providing evening school access to domestic workers and undocumented young people in 3 local government areas. Her name was on the screen. Her face was on the screen. Adaeze, the girl who had swept his compound at 4:30 every morning. The one who had been sleeping in the storeroom where the stockfish smell never left the air. Uncle Boniface watched the segment from his sitting room in Surulere, in the same tiled room with the same chairs he had told her not to sit in. Nobody in the room could have described what passed across his face, but everybody understood that something had settled there permanently, a weight that would not be leaving. Adaeze and Emeka were married 2 years after she left the house. It was a Saturday in the dry season. Their families, their friends, Mrs. Adetutu from the library who cried through the entire ceremony, and Miss Onyeka who gave a speech that made everyone else cry too. They had 2 daughters. She named the first one after her mother. The second she named Amara, meaning grace, because that was what the whole story had required more of than anything else. The education initiative grew. What had begun as a conversation between Adaeze and 3 other women in Mrs. Taiwo's kitchen became a registered organization with funding from 2 foundations and a government partnership for curriculum support. She was not running it from a sense of revenge. She was running it because she knew exactly what it cost a person to want to learn and have no path to do it. And she had decided that cost was unnecessary, and she was going to spend her life reducing it. She eventually cut contact with Uncle Boniface's household entirely. Not with drama, not with a confrontation or a final scene. She simply stopped responding and eventually stopped being reachable, and the silence became permanent. Her parents came to visit her in Lagos. Her father sat in the kitchen of the flat she and Emeka shared, a proper flat now, with furniture they had chosen together and light that came through 2 windows, and he held his granddaughter on his lap and was very quiet for a long time. Then he said to Adaeze, "I should have come for you sooner." She told him, "You came when you could, and I found my way." Both of those things were true. Patience is a gift. But patience given to the wrong people, in the wrong conditions, for the wrong reasons. Patience used to keep yourself small because you are afraid of what living will cost. That is not a virtue. That is a cage that has learned to call itself a virtue. Adaeze's story is not about revenge. She did not build her life to prove anything to Uncle Boniface or Auntie Ngozi. She built it because it was hers to build, and because the years they had taken from her had not taken the most important thing, her understanding of her own worth. There are people in this world who will take from you and call it helping, who will use you and call it family, who will keep you small and call it gratitude. They are not owed your endless patience. They are not owed your silence, and they are not the ones who get to decide what you become. Sometimes the bravest thing is not fighting back. Sometimes the bravest thing is simply walking out of the gate in the early morning light and not looking back. Adaeze knew who she was before Lagos confirmed it. She just needed a room of her own, 12 notebooks, a library 3 stops away, and one person who showed up twice a week with textbooks and no agenda. That was enough. It was always enough. My dear friends, if you have stayed with me all the way to the end of this story, I want you to know that means absolutely everything to me. We tell stories like Adaeze's at Helen Folktale because they are true in all the ways that matter. Not true as in they happened to one specific person. True as in they are happening right now in houses across Lagos and Accra and Nairobi and cities all over the world, to young people who were promised one thing and given another, who are surviving, who are studying in the dark, who are writing in notebooks by torchlight and waiting for the moment when they can walk out of the gate and not come back. If this story found you today, please share it with one person who needs it, someone who is still in the storeroom, still waiting for permission. Tell them, Adaeze left on Thursday morning, and the life she built after was worth every single step. Drop a comment below. Tell me which moment of this story stayed with you, and tell me where in this beautiful world you are watching from tonight. I read every single one. If you are new to Helen Folktale, welcome home. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a story. And before you go, click on the video on your screen right now. There is another powerful African story waiting for you. You do not want to miss it. Until next time, my dear friends, stay knowing your worth. Nobody else gets to carry that knowledge for you. Good night.